Hi, my name's Steve Endacott. I'm the chairman of electric car organisation, ECO. ECO is a green consultancy that helps businesses create green fleets of the EVs using the government's salary sacrifice scheme. To be absolutely clear, this is not traditional company cars because they've been taxed out of existence with 23% benefit in kind tax. But the government, to encourage the transition to EVs, has slashed that 23% to 2% for EVs, effectively making them the must-have company perk, because you don't even have to drive a single mile for company reasons to have a green EV. It's purely an employment perk. So who are ECO? We're basically a green EV experts that are there to help people transition to, or businesses transition to EV fleets and create this concept. If you look at why the government is doing it and why we should all get involved, it's quite simple. We need to save the planet. So I don't know about you, but I'm very concerned about global warming. I can see it every day. I can see it in the wildfires in Greece, etc. So what are we going to do? When you look at your personal footprint, 41% of your carbon output is coming from your home. That's actually quite hard to deal with because electric heating is probably 4 times more expensive than gas. So how many people in the country can actually afford to do that at the moment, given our current economic circumstances? If you look at that pie chart, the other big thing that jumps out is 29% is your car. Now, your car, you literally unplug the petrol pump, plug in the electric charger, and you're saving 29% of your emissions there and then. But again, there's complexities to that because EVs are more expensive, you think, if you buy them. However, using the salary sacrifice scheme, it makes it dramatically cheaper for people to move. So if you look at your own carbon footprint or your own corporate footprint, what can you do simply? Well, you can simply move to an EV to have a dramatic effect on your carbon usage. The other key thing is you look at that graph on the right-hand side, and you can say it's a slow transition, but by 2030, you won't be able to buy a petrol car. Every single car by 2030 new will have to be an EV. And by 2040, you see EVs are dominating. In 2050, every single car in the planet will be an EV. So that is a dramatic transition. And that has been set in stone because the government put legislation that says that that must happen. So even if the government changed to a Labour government, it's very unlikely that those deadlines and those targets will change because everybody in the world is recognizing we have to do something. The other thing that's happening is the manufacturing of EVs is changing fast. So at the moment, most cars being manufactured still petrol. But by 2025 and 2026, 50% of all new cars will be EVs. And once the production has changed to being EVs, it can't go back. So this is an accelerated move. Between now and 2025, only 1 million EVs will be sold. But by 2030, they'll increase to 10 million. So it's a dramatic shift coming. So therefore, why would you want to be an early adopter? Well, the reasons are that the tax benefits under salary sacrifice are enormous. So what is salary sacrifice? It's very simply a government-backed scheme, tax approved, where instead of paying your salary gross, so for example, say you earned £60,000, if you leased a car for £5,000 or £10,000, that would reduce your salary to £50,000, and you wouldn't pay any tax on that top end of your salary, not a penny. So whatever tax you pay on your highest earnings, whether it's a bonus or salary, you would actually save the complete tax element on that, which is a massive saving. So as I said before, we've got to be very clear here. This is not traditional company cars. You don't have to drive a single mile for work purposes to have an EV under the salary sacrifice scheme. In fact, most policies allow you to insure it for 2 drivers over 18. So you don't even have to drive the car yourself. You may get a car from your business under salary sacrifice, but your partner or even your children, if they're over 18, may drive that car. That's particularly important because most families have 2 cars and they won't necessarily want to move both to EVs yet, but at least 1 car in the family, you should be thinking about moving now to an EV because you're going to save the planet, but you're also going to save an awful lot of tax. As I said, the benefit in kind tax is only 2%. So when you actually look at what you're saving, an average employee will save 32 to 42%, depending on your tax bracket. Ridiculously, the more you earn, the more you save. So I'm not a great fan of the scheme, but it is a very effective employment benefit because you can actually save at least 32 to 42% off a private lease for your employees. Now, ironically, the business also saves money because the business won't pay the 13.8% national insurance on that salary sacrifice, and they can claim half the VAT back. So the business can actually claim 23.8% themselves, or they can decide to share that with employees, boosting their tax bracket savings to 45 or 55%. So it's at least half the price of a private lease, which is a dramatic benefit, I think. I'm using some examples from Tusker, one of our partners here, that just try to illustrate this. So if you took a MG4, the gross lease price is £489, but when you take off the tax savings, it comes down to £342, very affordable, saving over the 4-year life, £7,300 if you're a 32% taxpayer, which when you gross it up, because obviously that's a net saving, if you gross it up on what increased salary you would get, that's equivalent to a £10,000 increase in salary by just the saving you're delivering. If you drive a bigger car, like the BMW iX1, that saving goes up dramatically to £20,000 or £34,000 on gross salary. If you average it out, a green EV car is probably worth 10% to most employees as a pay rise. So it's a really, really significant benefit that you can offer. The other advantage is you're releasing a lot of cash that your employees have got tied up on their drive. On average, most people have about £10,000 in cash or credit tied up on their car on the drive. In this case, you're using the business's balance sheet. So therefore, you're removing all that liability to that person, and the business is the one leasing the car. It goes on the business's balance sheet. The other reason that I wouldn't buy an EV at the moment is actually the new prices are quite unstable. We recently saw a 20% cut by Tesla in their prices because they actually realized that they couldn't sustain such a high premium for the electric cars over petrol cars. At the moment, that premium is about 20%, but that's expected to erode away as more electric cars are manufactured. If you're worried about the new price, well, that's a bit odd because reducing new prices is great for you. But the problem is if you own an EV, that will knock on to second-hand EV prices. So there will be an unstable second-hand market. So very simply, why buy when you can lease and remove that risk? At the end of the lease, you just hand back the car and you get a new EV model. Yeah, and it's easy as that. There's no risk to the employee, no risk to the employer. The odd thing about salary sacrifice is it's not just the car you can salary sacrifice. It's anything related to that EV. So therefore, it's in your benefit to bundle as much into the lease as you can, because you can get 32 to 42% off every element. So for example, most leases will bundle in insurance because you can get 32 to 40% off it. Most leases will bundle in maintenance and tyres because you can get big tax savings off it. Most leases will even bundle in your breakdown and accident cover. So it's important to look at what you can actually get your salary sacrifice on, and it's every element related to that car, including even the charger. So it seems all good to be true from a business point of view. It's a big saving for the employee, it's a big saving for the business. So what is the risk? Well, the biggest risk is what happens if somebody leaves? Am I stuck with an EV I don't want? What happens if somebody goes on maternity? What happens if somebody has long-term illness? Well, very simply, you cover that off with a simple insurance policy. It costs about 10% of the lease cost. So in effect, the employee is paying an extra 10% to give the business the reassurance that they've got no empty EVs. And that's why most businesses will go, okay, that's good for the business, but a little bit unfair that the employee is paying it. So I will give back the national insurance saving to mitigate that. So very simply, the business can keep the VAT saving 10%, give the NI saving back to the employee, mitigate out the cost of the insurance. So you've got actually zero risk of having that car. Now, that's important for most employers because they don't really want the hassle of having a big fleet of cars. But if you look under this leasing model, all the maintenance is dealt with. The car's insured. All repair and accident is dealt with. So it's not like having a company car fleet, because you don't have to worry about the car. It's handled by the leasing company. It's paid for by the employee, who's actually getting a massive tax bracket benefit off it. So it actually is a win-win-win all the way around. Why do you want to move to an EV? Well, actually, it's 50% cheaper to run if you have home charging. And I'll emphasize that again, if you have home charging. If you live in a terrace house or you live in a flat, moving to EV at the moment is probably not a good idea. But 62% of us do have home charging. So that's really easy for those people to move. If you don't have home charging and you live in a flat or you live in a terrace house, I would personally wait a couple of years until the UK infrastructure improves. Because not only is it difficult to charge away from home, it's actually a lot more expensive. So public charges, slow charges are normally 25% more expensive. You only save 25% against petrol. And fast charges actually work out the same price as petrol. So to put that in context, though, I've only ever charged away 5 times in the 4 years I've had my Tesla sat outside on my drive. So it's not actually that frequent. If you've got a home charger, it's a bit like charging your phone. Every night you drive home, you plug it in, you charge again, you go again. So on average, most people only do 20 miles commute. On an average, most people do a 39-mile total usage of a car in a day. Given the car does 200 miles, do the maths. It's not difficult. You only ever use 20% of your car battery most days, and you top it up at night. Not difficult. The other benefit is EVs are 56% cheaper to maintain. When I took my Tesla in after 3 years of ownership to the garage and said, oh, can you actually do a full service? They go, what's wrong with the air conditioning? I mean, what do you mean, what's wrong with my air conditioning? Well, that's the only thing we need to service, sir. You don't have any brakes, it's electronic. You don't have any oil to change. You have 10 times less moving parts. So very rarely do you need to service an EV, or very rarely does it break down. It's much, much more reliable than traditional cars. And again, people don't know that, but it's actually 56% on average cheaper to maintain an EV. The last one, and the most important one, is we always see the OLEV zones being expanded in London, introduced in Bristol, in Newcastle, and other places. So very quickly, local governments and the national government are beginning to tax petrol cars heavily. So we have you an EV, you can avoid that. If you don't have an EV and you're living in London, you're now paying quite heavy penalties for driving around in older petrol cars. And that's only going to get worse. Why does the business want to do this? Well, I've explained it's a massive company perk. It's a massive way of recruiting people and retaining people, because it's worth 10% on your salary. But more importantly, it's also a massive ESG action. So virtually every major FTSE company now has to have a plan for ESG and also audit its actions. And they're quite often pushing that down the chain. So whoever the provider of services is to that business, they're being asked in their tender process, well, what are you doing about ESG? So the benefit here is if you provide a EV to your employees and you're replacing a petrol car, you can claim the whole 11,500 miles that other car would have driven on average, or 4.6 tons of emissions you can claim against your ESG actions. So very simply, if you move 10 cars, that would normally get you 25% closer to being carbon neutral. Obviously, the more cars you move in ratio to your staff, the bigger impact you will have on your business. Broadly, if you move 75 people out of 150, i.e. half of them, that would actually get you to carbon neutral as a business if you work in an office. So it's the biggest thing a business can do in terms of its ESG actions. And ESG is getting more and more important, because saving the planet is not only a moral, a personal responsibility, it's very much a government and now a business responsibility, because the government is pushing that pressure down onto businesses to help. So our government has introduced salary sacrifice to encourage this migration, to create green fleets, and it's a massive benefit in terms of tax breaks. So It's not that simple, however, and this is why we started our consultancy. So how does Eco help? Well, the first thing we do is we work across a range of the top providers, leasing companies. So we're not a leasing company. We're independent, free advisors. We do get small funding from the suppliers, but that basically comes from their margins and not your prices, because we have a price guarantee that means you can't go to these suppliers and buy cheaper. But we get small kickback for helping them get their business from businesses. When we go into a business, it's very important that the business understands how to implement these schemes in the first place. So I talked about the first one is risk mitigation. You'll be mad as a business if you didn't remove the risk of empty leases. It's something you don't want, and we can give you insurance that takes that away. You then need to look at who you give the scheme to, because there are affordability issues. So on a governmental level, you're not allowed to go below national minimum wage with a salary sacrifice. That's only 17 grand. So any employee earning more than 23 grand can actually have an EV. But we don't recommend that because of affordability. So we normally say to people, only offer it to employees earning more than £30,000, unless they come to you and say, okay, this is a second income, my partner is earning more, and we, as a family, we can afford the EV, and then you can go lower. But you've got to be very careful, because everybody likes a shiny new toy and a brand new car, but you've got to make sure they can actually afford it. So discussing and laying out clear policies on salary levels to offer it to is very, very important. Driver policy, as I said before, we firmly encourage offering at least one extra driver and possibly two extra drivers, because it means it's a lot easier for family to migrate to an EV if they're swapping one of their cars out. And why wouldn't you allow the partner to drive it? It's no risk to you. All inclusive, as I said before, we encourage including insurance. Fleet insurance is cheaper, including the maintenance, including repair, including the tyres. Take the risk of having that car and the hassle of having that car away from not only you as a business, but also your employees. And then the last one is, as I said, we quite often encourage people to pass back the national insurance saving to mitigate the cost of the insurance, because then it's a win-win. It's not cost the business anything. You're still retaining that 10% VAT saving. So it's a benefit to both. When you're choosing your EV partner, and it's quite important that you do choose the right partner, because it's not possible to have a supply per car. You can't go to all these different companies and say, can you give me one car? They simply won't do it. The reason they won't do it is, unlike normal leasing, there's so much more to it. They've got to give you reporting to go into your payroll. They've got to provide fleet insurance. They've got to provide the maintenance. So most of them say they want sole supply. So therefore, choosing the partner at the beginning is very, very important. And it's not just price you should consider, it's also availability of cars. So at the moment, there's a shortage of EVs, which means it's quite often a long wait time for those EVs, up to 6 months, and in some cases, up to a year, if you wanted a Porsche Cayenne. So we look at the partners and say, how many cars do they have on stock? What I mean by that is, how many cars do they buy up front and say, here's our stock cars, and if you want to specify your Tesla to the nth degree, you'll wait 6 months. If you're willing to take a white Tesla with a black interior, you can have it next week. So that availability of stock cars is very important, because there's no point stimulating the demand in your business to move to an EV and if you can't provide it. But planning is important. So when you're talking to your employees, it's saying, okay, plan for this move. On average, only 15% of people move to an EV in the first year of a salary sacrifice scheme. Then 10% more in the next year and 10% more in the next year. So this is not a scheme you just roll out. It's a long-term scheme, probably going to take 5 to 6 years to fully develop your green fleet. That means that you've got to engage with employees on an ongoing basis. So we have a complete marketing setup. For example, one of the first things we do is we always encourage all employees to fill in a survey to say, okay, fill this survey in so we get your current number plate. Just that number plate will tell us the age of the car, the size of the car, the type of the car, and will allow us to contextualize any advertising to you in the future about what you might move to. But it also allows us to value your car on a constant basis. So we can value every quarter your car to say, this is how much money is tied up in your drive. If you released it, you could have this car, this car, this car. We establish whether they have off-road parking. We establish what their location is. We establish what their postcode is. And then we can work out the postcode of the work. So we can work out the journey time, the length. So basically it allows us to profile the business of every single employee to work out who's likely to move to an EV, who would provide the biggest savings for you in carbon emissions. So it gives us a way of profiling and continuing marketing to those people. Because I said it's not just an initial launch. However, the initial launch is important. And we do webinars, we come to your offices, we have days where we show different people different cars, because it's important to make a big bang and say, look, we're here, this is what we can do. And we work very hard on those elements. So we are here as a consultancy to come in, help you through all the process, help you choose your partner, and help you launch it to your business. But we also do other things. For example, we have a charging business where we've actually set up an app where you can go in and you can select an installer for your charger. Once you've chosen a charger from 4,000 different installers, you can get it installed and you can also salary sacrifice it. But here's an important element. You shouldn't bundle the charger in with the lease. If you do, you're taking responsibility as a business for an electrical unit bolted on the side of somebody's house that theoretically could burn it down. Why would you ever do that? So what we say is you get the employee to choose their charger, their choice. You get the employee to choose and contract with their installer, their electrician, their choice. They pay for those two items, often £1,200 in total. They then make an expense claim to the business to get that £1,200 back. And then the business salary sacrifices it over 12 months, because again, you can't take the charge on somebody's house. So you have to do it over a short period. But that way, the individuals made the choice of the charger, individuals paid for it, and there's no risk to the business, even though you're still salary sacrificing it. A minor technical point, but quite an important one. We also have an eco app, which is about living with an EV. And very simply, it's about controlling that charger. The government's already legislated that every charger now has to be controlled so it can be charged at night, i.e. between 12 and 7 o'clock. Very soon, they will legislate to say you cannot charge during the day or during peak hours. That's the only way you're going to balance the national grid in the longer term. When you're charging away from home, as I said, for most initial adopters who have home charging, it'll be infrequent action. But we have every charger in the country mapped so you can just plan your journey and very easily use the app to live with an EV. Via the app, we can also allow you to sell your existing car via a motorway or we buy a car. And as I said, we value the car every quarter. And also importantly, we have energy switching. At the moment, there was a flat tariff imposed by the government on energy, and that's removed all competition for new customers, and people aren't offering great deals to get people to move between energy suppliers. But by the end of the summer, that will disappear, and there will be a lot of competition for electricity supply, particularly to people who own EVs, because you will have a 10 to 20% higher level of electricity usage. So moving tariff, particularly to day and night tariffs. To give you an example, the Octopus tariff at the moment is 42p in the day, but only 10p at night. It means that you can actually dramatically reduce the cost of running your EV when you move to a nighttime, daytime tariff. If you just control your EV to charge just at night, and our app allows you to do that. So not here yet, but energy switching, energy charging, controlling your app will become very important. So that's broadly covering why you should move to an EV, why you should be an early adopter, and why the tax benefits are so high. So I'm now going to finish off by just closing with a few busting myths about EVs. First one, EVs are more expensive. Well, yes, they are. It's broadly 20% more expensive to buy the same equivalent car as an EV is a petrol car at the moment. But that will disappear as we go past 25, 26, when 50% of the production is EV. But even at the moment, if you lease a car, it actually is 50% cheaper to lease an EV and it's a petrol car. So if you're leasing an EV, you're not only getting the savings of running costs, maintenance, but it's actually cheaper to get it in the first place. So again, look at salary sacrifice. Range anxiety. As I said before, average commute 20 miles, average daily use 39 miles, average battery life or capacity 200 miles. Do the maths. It's not an issue. You really don't have to worry about it. And if you are doing a long journey, there may be some inconvenience. You may have to get the train in the future. But now you've got Uber either end, it's not really that hard to Uber to a train station, get a train on a long journey, Uber the other end. And also nighttime charging and bookable destination charging will be a thing that appears in the next few years. Lastly, battery life. Everybody goes on about, oh, these batteries won't last. The myth has arisen because of Tesla evolving in California, and California legislative said, you have to guarantee these batteries for 10 years or 100,000 miles. And of course they did. But that's led to the expectation that the batteries will only last 100,000 miles. They don't. They last 200,000 miles and normally outlive the cars. Most batteries in cars will end up in walls in garages as your home charging batteries, because they will be left, still have 80% of their utilization even after 10 years. And to be clear, when they do degrade, it's not actually the speed it disappears, it's the range they can do. And given they do 200 miles now, they'd still be able to do 160 miles in 10 years' time. So basically, the second-hand market will be dominated by people who don't do that much mileage and now have second-hand EVs. So the value of EVs will be maintained. Last couple of ones, national grid will collapse, absolute rubbish. Over the last 10 years, the utilization of electricity has gone down by 15% because we've all got more efficient in our homes with lighting and other tools. So even if every single car became an EV, it would only increase the capacity of the national grid by 10%, and we've had a 15% reduction. So it doesn't take a genius to work out that actually it's not an issue. And also, in the future, all EVs will be charged off-peak, again, balancing the grid. And lastly, vehicle to grid, the biggest battery you've ever plugged into your house is your EV. And there's technology now that allows two-way charging. So you'll charge it in the morning, overnight, to full capacity. You'll go off to work. You'll come back. You'll still have 80% left. You'll plug in at 6 o'clock at night, and you'll power your home during peak. Yeah. And then you'll start charging again. So that will actually balance the national grid. The only thing we haven't got yet is the whole EV move is a little bit pointless if we don't clean up our energy supply. At the moment, 50% of our electricity generation is done by gas, which is dirty. But the government is investing in more nuclear, is investing by wind. And actually, for the first time last month, clean energy production exceeded gas production. And it's an accelerating curve. By 2040, we should be 100% clean, renewable energies. So it's worth moving to an EV. The biggest benefit will come when the electricity is completely clean. And as we all know, hydrogen production is also coming, which will give us more clean energy. Not in the car, because hydrogen is highly dangerous, flammable, but in terms of big charging units, will be driven by hydrogen. Lastly, EV production is dirty. Well, yes, it is. It's 20% more polluting to create an EV than it is a petrol car in countries which don't have clean energy production in terms of electricity, including our own. But that will change. And also, even taking into account that 20% premium, you'll get your payback of having the EV in terms of benefit to the country or benefit to the planet after 18 months. And as we know, most cars last 10 to 15 years. So basically, it's a big payback period. And also, that 20% premium ignores the fact of drilling and shipping oil, which we all know is a big pollution in its own right. So it actually may even balance out if you took that into account. Car parks will collapse. No, they won't. Absolute rubbish. EVs are 21% heavier on average or a like-for-like basis. Yeah, but car parks are built to carry 300% of their maximum weight. So there's no way our car parks are collapsing. But you will see lots and lots of negative press out there about EVs. Don't know why, because it is a very simple transition. You unplug your petrol, you plug in the electric, the cars are faster, the cars are better, the cars are cleaner. So that's my whirlwind tour of salary sacrifice. To sum up, it's a massive tax benefit. It's probably too big. If you don't use it as an employer, you're wasting an opportunity to give your staff a 10% pay rise. It's very easy to do, but you do need guidance. And that's where ECO have been set up to do. We come in, we run your RFP process to select your leasing company. We help you with the marketing. We help you with your contract amendments. We launch it to the staff and we do ongoing marketing. We're a free service because we're paid for by the suppliers, and therefore our strong recommendation is to talk to us further. If you are interested, please contact the lovely Ruth on 0771 343 7343 or by her email, ruth.endacott@electriccarorganisation.co.uk. Thank you very much for your time this morning. That's dead on past, and I'll now pass you back to Ruth to close the seminar.
Thank you, Steve, and I hope you all find that very useful. I did note in the email there's going to be an interactive session should you have any questions. If you do have any questions, can you put them into the chat for me and I can read them out for Steve? We don't seem to have any questions, Steve, so that's it. Thank you very much. And if you do want to talk, pardon?
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.